With a heavy heart, we are re-releasing our episode with Chef Floyd Cardoz today to honor a fantastic man and such an amazing chef. You will always be remembered and thought of very highly in our food and beverage community and in the world in general. Rest in peace.
Thank you for listening to the NCF&B podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss, and we are coming to you from fair Verona, where we lay our seed at the home of Chef Floyd Cardoz, four-time James Beard nominee, and the winner of Season 3 of Top Chef Masters. Welcome, Chef.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it. You've done nothing else except for those things.
No, that's it. Just cook my garden and I work a lot.
Yeah, no, that's totally right. But just to paint the picture, we try to kind of figure out why we're always here and why we're doing things. We're in New Jersey right now at your home, but a fellow friend of the show that we know in North Carolina, my kids like to call him Snobby McFarland, but I think his real name is Bobby McFarland. I do believe that you two have a connection in some way, and I'm going to tee this up, but I would rather have you explain it a little better because there was copious amounts of drinks happening when Bobby told me how you two met. He and I, that is. But I do believe that it's kind of centers around an older gentleman that makes a little bit of salami. Is that correct?
Yeah, so actually his name in the kitchen was Bobby Boucher.
Oh,
because he was the water boy?
No, because he used to make the amuse-bouche. And then the cook started calling him Bobby Boucher.
Nice.
So whenever they see him, they still call him Bobby Boucher, but he's more than that. So I met Bobby through a guy by the name of Lou Palmer.
Yes, Lou.
The guy used to live in Montclair, who was Bobby's neighbor, and he's about 80-something, and actually met him this morning, and someone said he's been 80-something for a few years now. But incredible gentleman. He loves to cook. He makes his own salumi. Mm-hmm. He has his own garden, and he bakes his own bread. He's always teaching young women by his standards to cook and teach them. So I knew Lou, and Lou said you should meet this kid who incidentally went to the same school as my sons, St. Peter's Prep.
Oh, cool.
And he said he went to Holy Name and he's thinking of cooking. Why don't you talk to him? So Bobby came and helped me at some events, and then eventually he went and worked in the kitchen and said that he wanted to come and work for me. So, he, as I said, he helped me cook in this charity dinner, and then he came and worked for me. But he also, helped me build I have these vegetable boxes in the backyard that Bobby helped me build that I still use. So I think of him all the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Bobby, a little man about town of everything.
Yeah.
Jack of all trades.
For our listeners, because maybe they just don't remember Bobby McFarland, because at the time when he was on our show, we didn't even have a seat or a microphone for him because we were interviewing Jesse Barden and Jeff Sizer, who had just opened Royale, the restaurant down in Raleigh, and Bobby McFarland was their chef de cuisine, and so he had worked down there. I think he and Jeff both came down from the New York area to open the restaurant. And so as time has gone on, Bobby's been a friend of ours and helped us out with some pop-up dinners, and he's now working for another excellent chef out in North Carolina, Jacob Boehm, doing Snap Pea Underground, where they just pop up all over the triangle doing these really, really artistic, unique vegetarian dinners. So I think he's actually doing one right now as we speak. He's popping up right now. But this was really great. Bobby and I were having cocktails at Foundation in Raleigh, and he's like, I know Floyd Cardoz, right? I go, no way. He's like, that guy has been such a mentor to me, and really, I guess, is responsible for getting his foot into the kitchen from the beginning. But as a reference to who you are, Floyd, we assume a lot of people know who you are just because of the visibility we've seen on both television and stuff, but you also really have probably primarily first notably known for working with Danny Meyer and opening Tabla.
So we opened Tabla in 1997, which was almost 21 years ago.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and for me that was it was more pioneering for Indian cuisine, because when I came to this country, I came in 1987 or 88, and I had no interest in doing anything with Indian food because Indian food was horrendous and horrible, and for the most part, a lot of restaurants still do a horrible job with it. And so I worked at L'Espinasse for 7 years. Came up as a line cook, from a salad cook actually, became the chef de cuisine.
And you had already owned your own restaurant in India before.
No, I just went to culinary school in India and Switzerland, and I worked for a hotel, which is all the best restaurants were hotels in India. So that's where I was. And
this is the Taj Mahal International.
Yeah. And actually, prior to that, I was a biochemist and happened to go into this business by reading a book.
Oh, by the way, you were a biochemist?
Yeah. And I was, at one point, and this I digress, go really back, but at one point I thought maybe I'll be a marine biologist or a cancer research scientist or a tea plantation manager. I mean, there was I love things with life in them. So I loved the sciences very, very much. And I was not very good at math, so the scientist thing slowly went away because I hated math. I loved animals and plants and things that made them work. And I read a book when I was doing my master's, and it was called Hotel by Arthur Haley. And
it was called what?
It was called Hotel.
Oh, Hotel.
It was about the hospitality, one hotel. And I was like, you know what? I love food. I love this business. Maybe I should go to school and try that out. So I finished what I was doing and went to hospitality school.
And how'd your parents take that?
Not very well.
Right.
My grandmother, nobody, I'm talking, this is like the early 80s, late 70s in India. And this business, especially in India, wasn't well recognized.
Yeah.
And it's only become kind of cool, quote unquote cool, over the last, say, 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And when I went to school, and that's where I met my wife, Barka, we had to cook. And I realized that I really enjoyed cooking, and my food tasted better than anybody else's. So I decided to do my first internship in the kitchen. Loved it, and decided that that's where I wanted to go, which was something that I had to break to my parents.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they were very happy. And I started cooking and enjoyed it. My first day, my first job, I got paid maybe $10 a month.
Oh my goodness.
$10 a month.
$10 a month. I borrowed money from my mom to go to work. I was working 6 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day. But I loved it. And
what kind of food were you?
I was cooking French food.
You were cooking French food.
Yeah, but I didn't realize at that point that there was no future in India, because
for French food or for cooking?
For cooking.
Yeah.
And that was probably a common thing when you were going to hotels or the nice restaurants where they weren't really cooking Indian food, right?
There were a couple, but nobody was doing Indian food, regional Indian food.
Okay.
People,
like the way your parents would have cooked it or something.
Exactly, that was done. Like India has over 32 states and at least 4 religious groups in each state, and each religious group cooks differently, and there are different geographical regions in each state, and transportation wasn't very good, and refrigeration wasn't there, so you ate what was within a 15-kilometer radius from where you are. So your food was very regional and very different from one place to another, and nobody ever did that or showed that. And so I had I don't want to do Indian restaurant food. I don't want to do tandoori chicken or naan or any of that stuff. Matter of fact, I didn't eat a naan until I was 19.
Oh, really?
I didn't even know it existed.
Wow.
So it's kind of going in the kitchen. You always strive to be a French chef. So I started cooking French and Italian food.
Sure.
Then I decided to go to Europe because again I saw there was no future. Went to Europe and saw the way chefs and restaurateurs were, and I was like, I could do this.
Yeah.
And I came to the States in 1987. Worked at a small Indian restaurant when I came in just to get a job to pay the bills. And then Grey Coons opened L'Espinasse, and I got a job with him.
So wait, at that Indian restaurant, was that the first time you were actually cooking Indian food then?
Yeah. I mean, I did cook Indian food at home,
Okay.
but it's Goan cuisine or things like that. I didn't do Indian cuisine like restaurants did.
Gotcha.
And this restaurant I worked in was in 106th Street on Broadway. It's a crazy place. They did anything but Indian food.
Okay. It was like an Americanized version?
It was a total Americanized version. They had dishes that didn't even exist in India.
Yeah.
They would put mango puree. They'd make 2 sauces, curry sauces, if you will.
Yeah.
And they take those 2 sauces and make 50 dishes from them by just either adding bell peppers or adding turmeric or adding cream or adding yogurt and adding, nut purees and stuff. So it's kind of crazy. And
Right, like we buy spices that say curry on them, but that's not really, like, curry isn't a spice. It's what happens when you blend spices to make a dish.
what I wanted to post today was I was looking at that Yanni and Laurel thing.
What do you hear?
I wanted to put curry or curry. And what is curry?
Which is curry.
Because I hear Yanni.
You hear Yanni?
Laurel.
Oh, wow.
Laurel.
Yeah.
Laurel. It's so stupid. And then we've been talking about this for the
I
last
know.
36 hours.
Ridiculous.
It's bizarre.
But back to curry.
Let's not.
But back to curry, yeah. So they were doing all this stuff, and I had no interest in doing it anymore. So then L'Espérance opened, and when I worked at L'Espérance and rose up through the ranks from being the salad cook to chef de cuisine, left them when Danny and I wanted to open Tabla. And when I met up with Danny, I told him, he said, let's do Indian food. I told him, no, I'm going to do my version of Indian food. And I said, because what you get here is not really Indian food. I said, I want to introduce America to the wonder of spices and the flavors of India, but looked through a very European French way. Because I thought, if you make it user-friendly enough, but people recognize the basic dish, but you give them different flavors, they will enjoy it even more.
Right.
And that's what we did at Tabla, and I made it very Frenchified and, fine dining, because I did 4-star restaurant food before that.
That's the thing. I don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but nobody was doing fine dining Indian food.
Nobody did.
Especially way back in 1997.
Nobody did that.
Yeah.
When it comes to vodka, it starts at the farm. Social House Vodka sources corn locally from a farmer who plants non-GMO corn. And because it's made from corn, it's also gluten-free. Social House Vodka comes from Kinston, North Carolina, and sources water from the ancient Black Creek Aquifer. Social House Vodka. Live socially, enjoy responsibly.
Was that always the intent? Because you opened that in tandem with 11 Madison Park, right?
Yeah.
Like Danny opened those restaurants at the same time.
Yeah.
So was that the idea, especially because he was opening such a fine dining? Was that always the intention for Tabla to be fine dining?
It was always the intention, because I came from great pedigree. I mean,
You're not going to go work for great foods and just then open
it's
up
like saying
that.
you work for, like Per Se or the French Laundry, today. If you think about it, or 11 Madison Park for the matter today, and say, I'm going to open a diner.
Yeah.
You don't really do that.
Every chef talks about it like that's their pipe dream. Like, oh yeah, man, I just want to go make some badass pizza. Like, just have a pizza slice joint.
But nowadays, that wasn't the way we thought
I'd
of
say
it.
you could still do that, but when you do that for as long as I did it,
Yeah.
it's not easy to do. Anybody who's worked, if someone's worked at, say, 11 Madison for a year, then it's easy to do. But once you work at 11 Madison for 6 months, or 6 years, or say 4 years, or 3 years, it gets into you.
Trained into you, yeah.
And then that's the way I started doing, foie gras with spices and duck with spices. And nobody ever did that, though duck with spices exist in India, or steak with spices exist in Goa. But nobody does that. And I started doing those things. I started making samosas with short ribs and smoked chicken and duck and pork and, peas and asparagus and things that were available in season.
I have to tell you that in some small way, you're also responsible for my marriage.
Oh.
Because this is a little known fact that my wife and I were dating. She was living in Los Angeles and I was living in New York. And she was coming to New York finally to stay with me, but also to meet my parents. And so the first meal we had together, the first dinner, with my parents and my wife, was my girlfriend at the time, was at Tabla.
Oh, awesome.
And so obviously it went well.
Well, there's a great documentary that was done. I think you can watch it on Netflix now or so. But it was the
Restaurant.
The restaurant, right?
Yeah.
And that was basically Danny Meyer's documentary about opening both restaurants.
Yeah.
And there's a moment though when you're talking about you wanted to do your food and how you've just described right now with the wide diversity of what Indian food is. You had to kind of articulate what Indian food meant to you and how you were making it. But one of the moments that I remember watching the show was that you were back at your house. Was it this house?
It was in Cedar Grove, actually, the next town over.
Next town over. So the camera crew followed you, and you're in your kitchen just working on things, and you're just like, I have to imagine, I mean, with the inspiration that Danny was putting out there, the speculation of what these restaurants were going to be, you had to feel some nervous tension about not just throwing down some Indian food, but kind of pushing it and really showing people what they've been missing this whole time. And it was like a big think tank was happening in your kitchen. At least that's what I gathered.
No, I was actually not nervous at all. I was
really?
not afraid of it at all. And I was lucky enough that Danny gave me free hand with the food. No one told me what to put on the menu. No one decided the direction on the menu. I made a menu, I cooked it for them, they liked it, and it went on.
So Danny found you through Las Venas, and then...
So this is another strange story. And I think there was a kid by the name of Nick Oltosh, not a kid anymore, but I think he may be in Atlanta now. And Nick used to work as the line cook on the Saucier station in Las Venas while I was on the Entremet station. And he had to make a consommé. And he was failing miserably, and the French sous chef was a real prick. Wasn't helping him. He was just letting him fail, and he made it 3 or 4 times. And he was just letting him fail at it, so I finally couldn't take it anymore, so I went up to him and said, let me show you how to do it, because I've done this multiple times. And I taught him how to make a consommé. And he remembered that, and we became friends, and he left Las Venas to go work at Gramercy Tavern, and Gramercy opened. And there was Michael Romano, who was the chef at Union Square Cafe at that time, and a partner at Union Square Hospitality Group, had this Indian phase at that time, where he loved Indian food and things Indian, besides food, women, and all those interesting things.
Yes.
And he convinced Danny that there should be an Indian restaurant in New York City, and Union Square Hospitality Group should open it.
Okay.
So there was rumors swirling around at Gramercy at that time that that's what Danny wanted to do. And Nick Oltosh overheard it and went up to Danny and said, if you want to do Indian restaurant or Indian food, there's one guy you got to talk to, and he's the chef de cuisine at Les Venas. He's the guy for you.
Wow. That's
Correct.
So that's how we met.
It's connections, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
well, it's so funny because we just, before you, met with Chef Nick Anderer.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a similar story, although he was already working at Gramercy Tavern when Danny was thinking about opening up Mylino and talking about how, we should open up, I want to open up like a Roman trattoria kind of thing. And Chef Nick was like, that's my thing.
yeah,
That's what I want.
You know, it's what I do, right?
Yeah.
By the way, Nick Anderer said, we told him we were on the way to see you, and he said on his podcast that we did with him that he, in being a Roman chef and not cooking with a lot of spice, really gives you a lot of credit, and said that he wanted to work with you to understand, since you are the master of spice. And he said he really had a much better understanding of working with spice in the kitchen after seeing you do what you do.
Yeah, spice is a funny thing, because you can either add too much or too little, and you can add too much and screw it up totally, or you can have just enough. And I've been blessed that I have a palate that I understand this, and I think a lot of that from working at Les Venas with Gray, because one thing Gray always taught me was that this food is about balance, and no matter what cuisine you look at, there's always that balance. Like Indian food is known for its balance, but people don't think about it, from the balance of hot, sour, spicy, sweet, bitter, and then using textures to build flavor.
Yeah.
And that's something that's done a lot in Indian food, but people don't really realize it. And most Indian restaurants don't do that enough. What happens is when you eat Indian food at home, you have a bunch of things of different flavors and textures and colors, and when you put them together, you get all these things happening. Mm-hmm. And the important thing is that we have to remember that the beauty of Indian food comes from that.
What do you mean when you say build texture to add flavor? Like, what are some techniques that you do to do that?
So one of the things that we either love food or we hate food, or we are okay with food. When we hate food, we won't eat that food again. When we're okay with food, we have one bite, and you have a second bite, and you have a third bite, and then after that you'll eat it because it's there, but it won't add to the experience. Mm-hmm. That leads a lot of the time to us getting palate fatigue. Mm-hmm. Now, when your food is exciting, and one thing that Japanese also do really well, actually everybody does that well, is that as you keep on biting and eating, you get different things happening in your palate as you eat.
Yeah.
So when you add texture to something, so it'll be soft, it'll be slightly hard, it'll be mushy, it'll be crunchy, and when you're eating, you get a burst of heat or a burst of acid, and you get this crunch happening, and then you get something that's softer. Your mouth is always getting entertained. Mm. So there's always that entertainment happening, so it keeps you engaged.
Yeah.
And when you add texture to a dish, like you can eat a piece of steak and mashed potatoes, then it's great to eat a steak and mashed potatoes, but how often can you eat that? You can't. But if you have a steak with mashed potatoes, and you have a crust on the steak, and then you put a little bit of straw potatoes on top, or you do a piece of broccoli that's nicely grilled, so now you have a different texture of the potato, the mashed potato, the steak, and the broccoli. Or even if you're eating a nice piece of pork belly, if it's braised and the top is nice and crispy, as you're eating it, you're enjoying it even more.
Yeah.
But if you have the soft skin on top, it's like, okay, after some time you get tired of it. When you eat a bowl of ramen, one of the things you get with ramen is you get all these things happening.
Yeah, so much going on.
And that's what makes it exciting.
Yeah.
And that's what I think I like to bring to cuisine and bring to food, because I understand it.
Mm. What are some things that, like us that are novice chefs or chefs that when we're cooking at home or something like, can do to incorporate Indian spices in our food?
So one of the things I love to tell people to understand is that just don't go and buy a whole closet full of spices, because you're never going to use them. Try and have a few basics for one, and then most people, I think, love heat. Okay, and especially in the south of the United States, because of the weather. Yeah, the spices help our bodies keep cool. And that's why if you look at food from the south of the United States, it's kind of spicier than from say Minnesota. For that matter. You know, because it's so damn cold and they don't need that.
Yeah.
But they'll use things like warming spices like cinnamon and clove and nutmeg. Mm. So use pepper, use chili, and understand what that does to the flavor. Mm-hmm. And then you take it to the next level where you'll use ginger, which also has some spice to it, or clove, which also has some spice to it, but it's a different kind of heat. Mm-hmm. So kind of what I like to do is I like to play off these flavors and build as you go along, but start simple. Like you can make a rice pilaf at home with stock and rice, basically. But what I like to do is I like to add a clove and a small piece of cinnamon and a green cardamom in there. It just makes it aromatic and changes it. The same thing if you're making a stew. Making a chicken stew, say. Mm-hmm. You can add ginger, you can add chilies, you can add some coriander seed, you can add clove in there, and it'll change the flavor of the dish. You add a little bit of turmeric to it. Yes, turmeric has the flavor and it gives it that yellow color, but if you put too much turmeric in something, it'll make it bitter.
And you're just building the complexity just subtly.
Subtly, very, very subtly. And
this segment is brought to you by the Triangle Wine Company. Visit Triangle Wine Company stores in Morrisville, Cary, and Southern Pines, North Carolina. Or order your wine and beer online at trianglewineco.com. And be sure to use our promo code NCFB to receive 10% off your purchases. Triangle Wine Company.
It's been said that you created the food for Steven Spielberg's 100-Foot Journey.
Yeah.
Is the movie somehow based loosely on your life?
The strange thing about the movie is that the last 2 years of Pablo's life, there came one of our investors came in with this guy, Richard Moraes. And Richard is half Portuguese. And me being from Goa, there's a Portuguese connection. And he's told us...
I'm sorry, why is Goa Portuguese?
Goa used to be a Portuguese colony.
Oh, duh.
And what people don't realize is that Goa was the oldest was colonized by the Portuguese who were in India for 350 years.
Oh, wow.
More than any other person.
Do you speak Portuguese?
No.
Is there any Portuguese part of the dialect then?
There are words that they use in Goa that's Portuguese,
Okay.
which have become accepted into into Goan language. But he would eat at L'Espérance all the time. I'm sorry, at Tabla, and one day he came to me and said, "Hey, I have a book that I want you to read," and he gave me the galley of his book, and I started reading the book. And this book, even though he didn't know me that well, the story of the chef who goes to Europe
Yeah.
and starts a life and nobody wanted to give him a chance, and was very similar to my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, you felt akin to this a little.
Yeah, because there were many things that were in the story that happened, say, to me that I didn't realize, I hadn't told anybody about, that this guy was influenced by his mother who did something, and I was influenced by my father who did something. And then one of the things that he said in the book, he used a phrase that a critic used for the food of this guy's restaurant. And I think it was Eric Asimov used the exact same phrase for my food when he reviewed us.
Wow.
So it was kind of very strange that happened. And as soon as I finished reading the book, I called Richard up and I said, "Richard, this is really, really strange." He said,
You're telling my
"You're
life.
telling my story, and I don't know you, and you don't know me."
Yeah.
And he said, "It's purely fictional." And from him going to like the restaurant, opening the restaurant and getting 3 stars, I opened Tabla with 3 stars.
Yeah.
Which was none of Danny's restaurants did that.
Yeah, Union Square didn't open it.
For a point of reference too, so this movie, which stars Helen Mirren, and it's based off of an Indian family that moves from India to a
France.
small town in France.
Yeah.
And they open up a restaurant, a traditional Indian restaurant, 100 feet across from a Michelin-starred traditional French restaurant owned and run by Helen Mirren's character.
Yeah.
And the Indian son, one of the oldest sons, becomes the chef of the Indian restaurant, but then he has this passion for French cuisine.
Yeah.
And of course there's a love story, and the sous chef is the beautiful...
Yeah, the book doesn't have the love story, does it? I don't know, but...
That part wasn't part of your life.
No,
you didn't meet the beautiful...
sous chef, no.
Sous chef, yeah.
No, I didn't meet the beautiful sous chef. My wife just doesn't know about it.
She does now.
On cue. Thank you, Mark.
But yeah, so it's so he said, and the things that he liked to eat, the paella and all those things that he put in the book were like dishes that I freaking love to eat.
It's like somebody was following you around in pen.
Yeah, but and then so Richard and I, when he did the book, we did a few videos of the recipes, and
oh, cool.
We had a friendship. And then when he sold the book to Juliet Blake, and Oprah finally bought it to be the producer of the movie.
Right.
They kind of asked me initially to come and do all the food, and then I couldn't because of they had 4 months of my time. I couldn't leave my restaurant for 4 months. But then
Ross and Chris could have kept it at that time.
No,
they were probably already gone.
Actually, Chris was working for... No, Chris is gone at that time.
Yeah.
And so then in January I get a call saying, "Hey, we're looking at the dailies and it's supposed to be a food movie and it's not, so can you come and help us do 5 dishes in Paris?"
Sounds like a fun reason to get out of town.
Yeah, I'll go to Paris for five dishes, and then by the time it was done, it was like 30, 40 surplus dishes.
And for those, I mean, now I'm giving the listeners two things you got to watch: the documentary Restaurateur of Danny Meyer, which tells a lot of Floyd's story of opening Tabla, but then you got to watch the 100-foot journey to really get an idea, because it is similar to your life story, and the visuals you see. I mean, his spice kit, right? It talks about his little spice kit, his little box that has basically been handed down from generations, and it kind of what defines him and all of his flavors. He's bringing these intense flavors to a country that wasn't used to having all these wild flavors, and that in a way was probably true just coming here to the States and making not hot spicy but spicy nonetheless food for areas that don't really normally have that influence.
Yeah, so it was a fun thing to do, though, being able to shoot for a film.
Yeah.
Because it's, and when they said it was going to be fake food, I said, I don't know how to do fake food.
Well, that's what I wanted to know. I was thinking the food has to look good, but it doesn't necessarily need to taste good.
It's kind of real food.
Yeah, you put it out for real.
Yeah.
And did the crew then and everybody else get to eat it?
Yeah, a lot of the food was eaten.
Like craft services by Floyd Cardoz.
Yeah.
This is sweet.
But it was a fun project, though.
So, but now you're, like we mentioned earlier, you're not a stranger to the camera, because then obviously you were on Top Chef Masters, but one has to think, wait a minute, there was another guy that was the chef, I believe he was Tom Colicchio, and now Colicchio is the executive producer of Top Chef and one of the hosts. Now on Top Chef Masters, he's not on camera.
He was on camera for the final episode.
The final episode, yeah.
And one of the things I made at that show, actually I just posted an Instagram post of it today, was I made this dish with Indian semolina and coconut milk called upma, where it's a very peasant dish that you eat. So I made this dish, and it was on the finals, and he tasted it, and he was telling me, he's like, when I first tasted it, I said, this guy's got balls making this dish. Because it was very simplistic, but as you eat it, it kind of grows on you.
Yeah.
It's that thing of the, you don't get palate fatigue with it. And it was, and I made it with coconut milk and kokum and mushrooms and chicken stock, which is none of that is ever used in India. But he tasted it, and he said, as I started eating it, I started liking this even more. So, yeah, but he was one of the partners at Tabla also. Right.
That's kind of a nice connection, though, for the Top Chef Masters, that you obviously knew Tom, being, you'd worked with him, of course, like with Tabla opening. And then you came down, and just being on the show in general, did you, I assume when you do a show like that, you expect to win, but you go in thinking, yeah, I could do this, but to actually do it.
I almost didn't do it. And because my wife told me that I should do it, I did it, because I was supposed to be traveling at that time and changed my plans. But when I went on the show, I remember I came back from Spain the previous night, and I flew the next day to Los Angeles to shoot the show. And I was totally jet lagged, and almost didn't make it back from Spain because the Northeast had a big snowstorm the day before.
Yeah.
So it was all kind of karma. But when I went on the show, it was like, whatever you do, don't be the first guy kicked out.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I was past the first episode, I was like, I'm playing with house money now.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't really give a shit if I win or lose. And just be true to yourself, and that's what I wanted to do, is be true to myself and cook things that I liked and be the person I am, and not try to be the person for the camera that a lot of people are. They change their personality just to be on TV, and I wasn't going to do that.
No, you were just a likable. I mean, meeting you now for the first time in person, you're exactly who I thought you were. You presented yourself exactly who you are on the show, and I think that's probably why you do what you do. You're just you are yourself. And those are the best people that you want on camera, not just, I'm going to be on camera person right now.
Yeah, I'm going to be an ass, and I'm going to disrespect everybody, and I don't do that in my kitchen.
Yeah, I actually, when you watch shows like this, everybody always says, like, oh, that's my guy. I'm going to root for that chef or that guy, whoever it is. Not being a star effer or anything. I said to my wife, I said, I think I'm going for Floyd. I think he's going to take this one. She's like, oh, yeah. And, of course, my wife was really behind because girl power.
Yeah.
She was behind Mary Sue Milliken, but also because we're from L.A., and we wanted her to take it. And she went pretty far, too.
Yeah, we were in the finals together.
It was you and her at the end, right?
Me, Mary Sue, and Tracy Desjardins.
That's right. Oh, yeah, you had to take the ladies down. How dare you? This whole Me Too movement.
Well, it was years ago, so
yeah, that's right.
This is fine.
No, I didn't take them down. They were they're still are really good friends of mine, and they're great people and great cooks and great chefs. And it all depends on how you look at the challenge for the day.
Yeah.
It's all kind of relative.
Can I ask a little bit behind the movie magic of these shows? I've always been curious. How long was the whole time? Now, since you were there from the beginning to end because you won, what was the amount of time? It seems like you're there for months.
I was there for 5 weeks.
5 weeks?
Oh, wow.
We shot pretty much every day.
That's a long time.
You wouldn't come. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a long time. I always wondered, and I always feel like, don't they, all the chefs that are there, don't they keep even the chefs that are off, don't they keep them in the corral, sort of like?
Not for masters, because we were all people who were established and had businesses to run.
You had to get back.
So we had to get back, and with the regular Top Chef, they're not allowed to use their phones, but we were allowed to call our restaurants and things.
Basically, you guys were adults.
But we didn't disclose anything to anybody, what happened on the show, because obviously you can't and you don't want to.
Right.
Because you take away from the show. But, I mean, there were some people who were cutthroat who wanted to win, and there were some people who were really kind, generous people, and I kind of hung out with those guys.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Moving on, so now you have a new challenge in your life. About 3 months ago, I think 3 months to the day, you flipped over the restaurant you were doing. I'm probably going to horrible make pronunciation of their restaurant, but it's Pawala.
You got it right, but that's one of the reasons why I changed it.
Oh, because it was hard to pronounce.
It's very hard to pronounce. And actually, I've opened in the last 4 years, I've opened 4 restaurants actually. 2 are very successful in India, and then Pawala we reflipped.
Okay.
But we rebranded and changed Pawala because the Pawala was doing everything that I wanted it to do. It was not kind of doing the numbers that I wanted to do, and people are not using it in the way that I wanted them to use it.
Which is
that I've done the fine dining again.
Yeah.
I had no interest in doing that again. I didn't want it to be 3-star service. I wanted to be casual. I wanted to be something that Americans are familiar with, and the way Indians eat, which is fun, casual, share, enjoy, multiple small plates, large plates, and just come in as entertainment. People were using Pawala Avenue that wanted to eat between 6:45 and 8:30, and they all wanted to sit for 3 hours. And
they wanted it to be tableau too, essentially.
Yeah, and my prices weren't reflective of that experience.
Yeah.
So I wasn't charging you $110 a head like I did at Tabla. I was charging you more like $60.
Yeah.
And they were paying $60, but they were using it like a $110 restaurant. Which, if you do business, that doesn't really work well. You're just working for
especially if you're only getting the 6:45 to 8:30 seatings.
You're doing it just for the landlord. And people were coming in, getting an appetizer and getting an entree, and they weren't sharing food like I wanted them to share it. So I spoke to a friend of mine who said, I told him, I said, I need to change this, and he advised me and helped me change it, and and I said, I wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to be like my restaurants in Bombay, which are exciting and fun and colorful and interactive, and it's about you coming with a group of your friends, or you coming alone and sitting on the dining counter and eating and still having a good time, and you're not spending too much money. And he helped me design it, and he said, hey, let's get, I think this should be like a Wes Anderson movie, and it should be like the Darjeeling Limited. And he said, I'm going to help you get the designer. So he called, and I said, and the person of me is Will Guidera. So Will used to work for me at Tabla many years ago,
and he was at ENP.
He still owns 11 Madison and Nomad, but he's been a friend and an advisor for years. And before I opened Powell, I went and spoke to him, and he kind of gave me his organization. Said, use my controller, and they'll help you build spreadsheets and do whatever you need. So Will has always been that kind of, he's almost family to me.
Yeah.
And he says, so what do you mean they want to do it? He says, I'll fucking call them. So he called up this designer and told her, said, you have to do it. You don't know who this guy is. You have to do it. And then I spoke to her and she said, yeah, I'll do it for you. So she came and she helped design it, and she called, then he said, you should get some art on the wall. And his wife was following this artist called Hate Copy. And he says, we should get Hate Copy. And I'm like, well, how can I get? I said, you'll get Hate Copy because you're Will from 11 Madison. I said, he said, what do you mean? He said, we'll get her. So we got Hate Copy to come and do the mural, and we turned the restaurant around in 7 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
A whole reboot like that.
Whole rebuild, rebrand in 7 days.
So now you have Bombay Bread Bar.
Now we have the Bombay Bread Bar.
Simply called it the Bombay Bread Bar. It's a little easier to pronounce.
Easier to pronounce. It also connects to, when I opened Pawala, one of my friends, another chef, said you can't go back, and you should try to recreate what you did. And I believed him, and I think that was a mistake, because people remember the bread bar. A lot of people remember the bread bar fondly and tabla fondly. People have eaten at my restaurants in Bombay, the Bombay Canteen.
Mm-hmm.
And tying the two restaurants that I'm known for together, there is a little bit of crossover from the restaurant in India, and a little bit from the bread bar. But it kind of connects to who I am and the way I want to eat now and the way I want to push things in cuisine now, because I want it to be fun. I want it to be interesting. I want it to be enjoyable. I want it to be
sophisticated but casual.
Yeah, and like you see the people coming in today, everybody's having a good time. People are not staying for 3 hours. Some people do. People are coming enjoying a cocktail, and some of them are drinking wine.
I was going to ask you a couple of things, and I know we're running short on time. First question, what would be the differences, because obviously Bombay Bread Bar is in New York City and it's in America, what would be a couple of different dishes or different takes on dishes between the Bombay Canteen that you would have?
So, one of my, and it's just strange you're asking me this question, because this morning I met someone who's saying, so what is this farm to table thing? And this new thing that everybody's doing, and I said, it's not really new.
Yeah.
And like now chefs don't even use it because we've gone through it.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm telling you the story is because in India, that didn't exist till 3 or 4 years ago.
The
idea of farm to table, because people were enjoying imports. So the restaurant in Bombay, what it does is we only use Indian ingredients. We do not import anything. And we source things that are many changes frequently, which is something that nobody ever did till we opened. Mm-hmm. So every 3 months we change. There are some core dishes that stay, but things change as they come in and out of season. Like, I hate to use the word farm to table, but that's pretty much what chefs do in the United States.
Seasonal,
yeah, you work seasonal, and when things come in from a farmer, you put it on, and when it's not, it goes away. So that's what we do in the Bombay Canteen. So the food there is only ingredients from India. The food here is only ingredients from the United States.
Okay.
So our main ingredients are only United States.
The concept is the same in the fact that you're just keeping local.
Yeah, so we have a dish in the Bombay Canteen called egg kejewal, which is a dish that we adapted from a dish that was made in clubs. And my chef Jose came up with this idea of using
clubs, like nightclubs?
No, like clubs, like
country clubs.
Like country clubs.
Yeah, okay.
But they were normally eaten just for meals. And so we took toast, brioche toast, and what they make it in India is a fried egg and Amul cheese, which is a processed cheese that's melted on it with chilies, and you eat it. So what we did there, we changed it with the sauce and we upgraded it. But what I do here, I changed the sauce slightly because I can't, because of the temperature, we can't use coconut oil only. Coconut oil sets anytime but in the middle of summer. So, and the other thing is that I wouldn't use Amul cheese. I use cheddar, New York State cheddar cheese. So kind of change it.
Still use chilies?
I still use chilies. I use serranos because I don't get Indian chilies. So kind of doing the same thing.
So the heat is going to be different.
Slightly different, yeah. Exactly. The garlic is different. The shallots, like we don't do shallots in India. I do shallots here.
Mm.
Then there's another dish that we have on both menus, which is the halim, which is a dish from Hyderabad that started off at Pawala, and then I took to the Bombay Canteen, which has become a dish on the Bombay Canteen, which is a stew of cracked wheat and lentils and lamb and caramelized onions and garam masala, and it cooks for hours to 6 hours, so it becomes almost like a porridge. So we have that in both places. We use goat in India, and I use Elysian Fields lamb over here. I use lamb neck over here.
I understand.
Yeah.
You know?
We got to get you to come out, not this year, but the next year. Lamb Stock. It's a collection of chefs. It's an invite only. It's not for the public. There's no money that exchanges hands. But Border Springs Farm, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's in Virginia. It's just a great lamb farm. And Craig Rogers that owns it.
Forrest made a great video about it. You can check it out on YouTube if you want to see it. It gives you a really good idea, actually, what lamb stock is all about.
And speaking of Forrest being here, we didn't announce him. He's been on the show as well as all of our shows in New York. And Forrest, I do have to ask you to contribute to this part. In speaking about Indian cuisine, please describe our lunch that we had today and the snafu and then where we ended up. And please tell us what we had.
Well, so I used to work on 30th between Park and Lex, and I would go to Kalustyan's all the time, and we had 30 minutes, and so we had to eat something quick. I was like, you know what, I know the spot, we're going to go to Kalustyan's. I walk in, I tell the guys to go upstairs, and the woman behind the counter is like, oh, you must be looking for food. We actually don't do that anymore. And so I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And so we scrambled and we just went to the next place we saw, and it was like a buffet counter, and the guy scoops it for you and throws it in the microwave. And we're mostly done with our meal, and then Matt looks up, he's like, yeah, it's a bad time to tell you this, but they have C rating.
Okay. Of which I said, all this food is not going to be a part of our bodies for very long.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part about Indian food, and that's one of the reasons why the same thing was happening in India, where people were forgetting Indian cuisine, and that's why we opened the Bombay Canteen, is to kind of celebrate local, seasonal, regional Indian food, and we use India as a canvas, you know, to like as our palates, we get whatever we want. And at the Bombay Bread Boy, I do the same thing. Is like, how can I get you like reshado? You know, this is a spice mix that my family would make with pudding fish. You know, how can I get you? How can I make you a dal that I'm making? I'm doing a chicken dish on the menu right now called dalcha from Hyderabad, which is using chickpeas, split chickpeas, and chicken with tamarind and caramelized onions. This is amazing chicken curry that you never see. Or do a pork chorizo biryani that I do on my brunch using chorizo from the Portuguese, cooked with rice and bacon and a fried egg on top, the way my family would eat it.
Yeah.
So doing things like that, or doing something called keema pao, which is ground lamb and bread, using Portuguese pao, bread, for breakfast that every Muslim restaurant offers in Bombay. You don't see that in any restaurants in the United States, or in India. In India you do, but anywhere else in the world. So trying to find these things, or like doing bel puri, or doing a chickpea chaat, green chickpeas, which I remember eating with the guy coming in his cart and toasting it in his pan, and you'd eat it with a little scoop, you know, a leaf scoop.
Yeah.
That was your snack. Things like that you don't see. And things like that are what I want to celebrate. I want to show people, it's like, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
There's these cool ingredients that you get green chickpeas in the United States. I had actually had someone, this is a true story, I was doing an event in Chicago for these guys, these research scientists from Yale and Harvard and the best, you know, schools in the United States. And this guy comes up to me, and he's total nerd, comes up to me and asks me, so, how do you make chickpeas green?
You should have given him some great BS, widely different molecular astronomy
and I
answer.
looked at him, and I really thought he was kidding. I said, you're kidding, right? And he says, no, how do you make them green? I'm like, they're just unripe dried beans. But
well, bringing it back, because we'll put a bow on the episode now, but so you welcomed us into your home, and you had told us earlier that your son was visiting, he's in town, and you said you were going to cook dinner, or the dinner was going to be prepared tonight.
Yeah.
How does the dinner get handled in this house, in your home? Are you still the head chef here?
When I'm home, I cook. My wife normally cooks during the week.
Okay.
When my son's home, I try to get them involved with cooking, because I feel that's bringing food and culture and family together is very, very important. And most people in the United States are forgetting that.
Yeah.
Because I remember my grandmother cooking and sitting down with her, and the kitchen was accessible to everybody. And you'd go in and you sit and you talk, and you hear the stories of why a family ate a certain thing. Like, you know, I was talking about the chorizo pulao. My grandmother made it for me, but you'd slaughter your pig for the family, and you made these sausages that were not cured like salumi, but they were sausages that needed to be stewed. So that when the monsoon came and you had no fish because it rained so much, you had something to eat. So telling these stories to the kids that when we cook together, tell them why we do certain things, and it's always about something that we want to eat. It's not, there's a story like my son, he met Peter. I got two quick stories about Peter. So one day I made a truffle pasta with using truffle butter and wild mushrooms, and we made dinner, and he must have been about 8 years old, and there was leftover at Mid-Topple at that time, and I get a call in the kitchen. He called, the sous chef picked up, and I was in a meeting, and he didn't interrupt me, and Pete called back 3 times. And finally the sous chef comes and says, "Chef, your son has called, and he's called 3 times. You need to go and see, there may be a problem." So I go to the phone and said, "Well, what's up?" He says, "Dad, I can't find the truffle pasta." So those are the kind of emergencies we have.
It was good pasta. He needed to know.
He didn't know it.
Can he cook?
Yeah, he cooks now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What are you cooking tonight?
We're going to do lamb chops, and I'm going to do some beans and asparagus from the yard, and have some Kobe. Then I'm going to maybe do some little bites of Kobe.
Wow.
With some horseradish, and open a bottle of wine, and maybe some good time.
That was my next question. So I've been told that Greek wine goes really well with Indian food. What wines or what beverages in general do you like to pair with Indian food?
I love food. People think that you got to drink beer only, which I think is wrong. I think that white wines work really well, sparkling wines work really well, younger, Californians, New World wines work really well. Some younger Italian wines work. Anything with age doesn't work well with Indian food.
Okay, because the food overwhelms the wine.
Yeah. But
you need them to be vibrant.
Big. You need them vibrant. Like Zinfandels work really well with
Australian wines. I imagine.
Australian wines, Chilean wines, Burgundian wines. Younger Burgundian wines.
I like that idea because everyone always says, old world wines are the food wines, food wines. But I like this, that in a cuisine nature that maybe we don't understand as well because Indian food, as you mentioned at the very beginning, is so vast. There's so many options going out there, and it's not necessarily what we don't go to wine for Indian food so quickly, that maybe what we're really looking for is the new wine, the wine that's just being produced.
Actually, Portuguese wines too work really well with Indian food.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And if you do like Vino Verde or you do Chacoli, things like that, from Spain, Chacoli from Spain works well.
So from what you're saying, there's not a lot of wines that don't not bottles with a lot of age, but otherwise it's hard to miss, it sounds like.
Yeah, old Bordeaux are not a good match.
Yeah.
Keep it vibrant, keep it like fleshy, probably like
full,
bigger, bolder flavors.
Yeah.
And you're just going to have a really enjoyable, impactful meal. It's not going to be subtle.
No, it's not. It's, Indian food is also not about too much of heat in food. Indian food is a balance. So there are dishes in the north of India that don't have too much of chili in it because it's not hot there. The weather's like us.
Going back to what you were saying about Minnesota versus
exactly. So they use more cream and they use more dried ginger in their food, or they'll use green cardamom or saffron and things like that, which is subtler. Whereas if you go down south, they'll use like black pepper and chilies and things like that.
Right.
So what is the bottle of wine that you're opening tonight? Do you know?
I don't know yet. I'll go down and pick something up. I'm going to open a bottle of champagne for sure because my son's girlfriend Emily just graduated from pharmacy school to do a doctorate. So I think we're going to open champagne today, and then we'll open up. Maybe since it's steak, maybe I'll open up Old Italian.
Sounds great. Yeah. Well, we don't want to keep you from enjoying time with your family. We very much appreciate you opening your door and welcoming us in. Excellent tea, your wife, the hospitality, the dogs making an appearance. We really do feel like we had afternoon tea with Floyd Cardoz.
Exactly.
Yeah. Matt, what else you got?
Well, yes, echo what Max says. Thank you so much for having us here and for sharing your story with us. Keep doing what you're doing, please. And everybody, when you're up visiting New York or North Carolina or wherever you're listening, go to Bombay Bread Bar and you will eat